Okay. That's credits. Alright. Okay, so here's the deal. First things first. The bottom center of the screen says that we have beaten 12 games in 2024. And 459 since we started doing this in 2020. Those numbers are incorrect. We've now beaten 13 games in 2024 and 460 since we started doing this in 2020. All right, let's turn this, whatever this is, down. Okay, so let's talk about Torn Away. Let me start by saying that this game is effective. It accomplishes what it sets out to do. So regardless of how I feel about it personally, if this is the kind of game that you like, you should play this game. It is good. It is, let's talk about what it's particularly good at. It's surprisingly immersive for, you see the art style where it's like this 2D kind of like paper cutout almost looking hand-drawn thing. Almost like kind of like a South Park, but dreary art style, and you think, well, this isn't going to be immersive. I mean, it might be engaging, it might be interesting, it might be sad, it might be whatever, but that's not going to be immersive. But it does these things with this perspective that's quite interesting. It starts out where you're in a 3D plane and you're kind of walking through a room, third person, trying to solve puzzles or whatever, and then it switches to a straight up 2D side-scrolling puzzle platformer. And then it goes to first person sometimes. And there's something about switching in between those perspectives that makes it very, like, when you're in the 3D plane, you really feel like you're in this little house. Or when you're when you're in the first person, you really feel like you're in this battlefield or this, forest or wherever you are. And when you're side scrolling and you're running from whatever, Nazis or whatever, you really, it really does do a better job than you would think of putting you there mentally. It's intense when it needs to be, and it's not boring. What's the word I'm looking for? There are these points in this game. The pacing is very interesting because there will be some points where there's like a chase sequence or something, and you've got to hide from the flashlights or whatever. Like I've seen in a million other games, and those parts of the game are a little janky sometimes, but they're mostly pretty effective. But then there'll be these moments where you're just like fixing a boot, or you're peeling a potato, or you're sewing a mitten or something, and there's something about like those parts of the game are really well done. There's something, I've done that kind of menial work before, particularly when I was younger, where it's like, okay, suddenly I'm folding clothes. I remember I had a community service, actually. This wasn't that long ago. About 10 years ago, I had community service, and I had to fold clothes at Goodwill for like 6 hours. And this work sucked, don't get me wrong, but there was something about that very simple task, unending task, where there's just a giant pile of clothes next to you and a bunch of folded clothes on the other side, that you kind of get lost in them. There's something in that. There's something cathartic about that menial work, where it's very tactical and you're just doing tactile, and you're doing the same thing over and over again. And this game captures that better than any game I've ever played. Is that a great? Well, except for maybe Papers, Please. We'll get to that more in a second. That's not something I would say is like my favorite thing about a game, is when it can capture menial tasks. But it does. There are these moments where it's like, okay, you've just been through some harrowing experience, and you've just made it out with your life or whatever, and you're still alive. Now you've got to fix a boot, and you're going to take 5 minutes, and you're going to fix this boot, or these several boots, and you just do that for a while in this game. And that sounds horrible, probably, but there's something about it where you just suddenly the game's not about anything else, and my life isn't about anything else other than just trying to make sure that these boots get fixed. And I liked that. It made me think about those moments in my life where suddenly I had to do something that was just really simple and basic, but maybe hard work, and just focusing on that task. There have been a lot of games that I have played that are like these short narrative, depressing games. I played one recently called Lost Words Beyond the Page. And there are these short narrative experiences about something sad. And I've played a bunch of those. There's a bunch of those kinds of games. And this one's more effective than most of those games. Most of those games tend to get lost in trying to be something more conventional, trying to be satisfying in a video game type of way. This game doesn't really do that. It doesn't seem to give a shit about conventional video game tropes at all. It's except for like some of the running and hiding stuff, but it's the pacing makes it just really work. Now, is this going to rank in my top 100? No, it's not even probably going to rank in my top 200 because this isn't exactly my kind of game. But for what it is, I was pretty impressed, actually. And the story is fucking bonkers. Like, bonkers is not the right word. It's very depressing. It has its moments of lightness, but it's mostly just a dark fucking slog. That's what the game is. It is a commentary on how shitty life must have been for children during World War II. That is what it is. That is what you are in for. And it doesn't really give you much of a silver lining. It really doesn't. The game is actually impressively bleak. Most games that I've played like this, they try to give you some kind of like, oh, but everything kind of is okay because at least at the end of the day you learned about blah, 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 or everything kind of turned out okay at the end, you get a happy ending. And this game doesn't give a shit about any of that. It's just going to put you through the fucking horrible paces that children, I guess, had to go through when they were Russian child slaves, or, whatever, or whatever else happens during this game. So it's really sad. It's really bleak, but it's as someone that's interested in something that's crunchier, that's more video gamey, like somebody that likes like RNG numbers and stuff like that. You don't get any of that in this game, to be clear. But the puzzles and the tasks that you have to do, you can get lost in them. And I did several times. So those are the positives. This game is not perfect. There is one just very clear outlier as far as the negatives. One in particular. The voice acting in this game is bottom tier. I can tell that this is a game that was designed in Russia. And it's about a Russian child. It takes place partially in Russia. And it's very clear that none of the most of the voice actors, their first language is not English. And the people that don't have an accent are some of the worst, like literally maybe some of the worst voice acting I've ever heard in a video game. There's one character in particular that talks a lot, has more lines than anyone else, and the voice acting is maybe the worst I've ever heard in a video game, maybe. And I played the original Resident Evil, and it really takes you out of it. It's distracting how bad it is. That is immersion. That is for a game that's otherwise surprisingly immersive. That is immersion breaking. And none of the voice acting is good. The kid is passable, but it's not good, and most of the acting is outright bad, and the writing doesn't seem like it was done by somebody whose English is their first language. Now, good on them for trying. They probably worked with a limited budget, and it would have been a lot more expensive to smooth that over, and I get that. And so I'm not going to personally hold that against them, but when I'm looking at a game like this, I have to observe what I see, and what I see is that the voice acting, at least for an American audience, is bottom tier. It's bad. It's really bad. So that was unfortunate, but and then the only other thing is there were a couple of situations where some of the platforming puzzles wasn't really clear what to do, but the game did a fairly good job of giving you hints if you wanted them, And there were a couple of sections where it wasn't clear where you were supposed to go, but it wasn't that big of a deal. There were a couple of glitches. The game did crash on me once. Couple of characters were bugged out where they looked super weird. But that wasn't that distracting. None of that was nearly as distracting as the voice acting. The voice acting was the only thing about this game that was just really bad. Everything else about this game was pretty good to great. Some of it was great. I applaud, this game's clear drive. The clear motive of this game is to put someone like me, 40-year-old American who's never seen anything like this, into a position where they can understand better how difficult life must have been like for a 10-year-old girl in war-torn World War II Russia. And this game did a really good job of that, despite its flaws. So as far as like the reason for this game's existence, I think it nailed it. 95%. There's a couple of things that weren't maybe perfect, but I think it did a really good job. So overall, I enjoyed this game more than I thought I would. And the times when the game was at its best was when it was either doing something more conventional, like stealth parts where you had to run at the right time and hide from flashlights, hide from hazards, kind of like Bramble or Limbo, something like that. Or when it was doing one of those weird menial tasks. My favorite things that I did in this game were repair boots. That was my favorite part of the game. Was just repairing boots and peeling potatoes. Those were probably the things I enjoyed the most in the game. And you just it's easy to get lost in that kind of thing. I enjoyed it. All right. That's it for Torn Away. Last order of business. Torn Away, thank you for allowing us to play you. I'm glad that you finally come to consoles so that I can enjoy you. But we are now going to delete you from our console and never play you again. Bye! Thank you. Thanks a bunch. Appreciate you.